What's up, guys? This is Ray J back with another video. And today I want to break down what's happening with Donald Trump. He signed some executive orders that increased tariffs on China, and that caused the market to see a very, very big rug pull. So I'll talk about what he said and what he's going to do tomorrow, as there could be more tariffs coming. I'm going to talk about when he's going to be speaking in front of Congress and how this could affect things, and what's going on with the charts, looking at Tesla, SPY, and the others. But first, just note that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I'm saying as financial advice whatsoever. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Moomoo link. If you deposit $100, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks. If you deposit $2,000, you're guaranteed 30 in total, not to mention 8.1% APY in uninvested cash. Anyways, what's happening to Tesla in the markets? Let's go over this. So as you guys can see, Tesla's been on a very, very clear downtrend for the last couple of months, making lower highs and lower lows over and over and over again. And when you go to the daily time frame right over here, you guys could quite clearly see Tesla has these gaps to fill, especially if we lose the support we held on Friday. If we lose that support, we could be dipping to fill this gap towards 250. So just keep that in mind. There is weakness on the charts. But why was Tesla in the green in the morning? And then all of a sudden it sold off very, very hard with the markets. Well, keep in mind, it's not just Tesla. Tesla's not alone in this. The whole market is responding to some very, very big news that came out involving Donald Trump. So let's talk about this. So Nvda is down 8.69%. Apple's down 1.58%. Google, Meta, and the others are down quite a bit. There's other reasons why Nvidia is down. I did talk about that in my, the video before this one as well. And then health technology, consumer non-durables are somewhat in the green, but then the other stocks are in the red. Tesla's down 2.84%. So what is going on? Why is Tesla dumping like this? Let's talk about this. There is some big news that came out from the White House that Donald Trump signed an action to tariff China at 20%. This is big, big, big news because before there was all this confusion about when he's going to sign the tariffs and this and that. Many people said he was bluffing. He's not going to do it. Some people thought it was just negotiation. But in this case, it's not just negotiation. He's not just doing this just for the sake of it, just to look tough. He's actually very fixated on taking action and imposing these tariffs. So let that be very, very clear, because he's not done just yet. The news came out right over here about how Donald Trump has signed Executive Order 14195 that hikes tariffs on Chinese imports from 10% to 20%. He is blaming this on China and saying that they cause a lot of problems in the US. So that is what one of his reasonings is. Not to mention the fact that he claims that there's a big trade deficit that he's trying to offset. And simultaneously, he is trying to create more fairness for the US and try to build more revenue. That is what Donald Trump's opinion is. I'm not going over every specific detail about the reasoning and all that, guys. And I'm also not trying to say Trump is right or wrong. That is up to you to decide. I'm just trying to be very unbiased when I say this. Also, Donald Trump added that tomorrow, tariffs 25% on Canada and 25% on Mexico, and that'll start. That's what Donald Trump said, quote unquote. There's going to be more tariffs coming tomorrow. Please keep that in mind, guys. That's very, very important. So he's threatening even more tariffs. Is this a surprise? The answer is not necessarily, because I was talking about this in my previous videos about how we had this timeline. And for March 4th, we were expecting tariffs on Canada and Mexico, not to mention on China, the additional 10% that he was threatening. So far, the Chinese ones have been signed, but now we have more potentially coming for Canada and Mexico. And I want to talk about those in a lot more detail. Also, keep in mind that tomorrow, Donald Trump is giving a very important speech that could shake the whole stock market and the market right now. What is he doing? He's going to be speaking in front of Congress. He's giving an address in front of them, and this is going to be very, very important. Why? Keep in mind, it's going to be happening at 9 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, so many hours after the stock market closes. At 9 p.m. tomorrow night, Donald Trump is going to be giving his speech, and this may cause a lot of volatility, so get ready just to be safe. He's going to be talking about the tariffs, how he's trying to stand up for America. It's just his opinions and what he wants to do, so please keep that in mind. It may cause more volatility. On top of this, I just want to go over the tariffs now. So as a reminder, okay, 16% of our trade comes from Mexico. Then we have Canada as number 2 at 14%, and China is number 3 at 11%. Donald Trump has imposed 20% tariffs on China. They increased it by an additional 10%. And then we have Mexico and Canada left for tomorrow, as Donald Trump is saying. So what could this mean for the markets? I want to talk about this and actually source some research from the Council of Foreign Relations, as we have something important to talk about. So what's going on with these tariffs? As a reminder, nearly half of all U.S. imports, more than $1.3 trillion, comes from Canada, China, and Mexico. And based off what is going on right now, there has been some economists who believe that the new tariffs could reduce the overall US imports by about 15%. That's very, very important. So that could be, once again, changing the amount of tax revenue that's coming in, but simultaneously, there's a possibility that the overall imports could decrease to some extent. So you guys could see this is how much of our imports come from these different countries. We have $430 billion from Canada. We have about $480 billion from Mexico. And we have about $448 billion worth from China. That's our imports overall. Almost half of all of our imports come from them. That's very, very important. Please keep that in mind. Now, to add on to this, keep in mind that a large percentage of our imports are involved with cars. They actually come from Canada and Mexico. Mexico is actually number one for that when it comes to auto manufacturing. Then crude petroleum, that's actually very, very big from Canada. We actually get $97 billion worth of our petroleum from Canada. Keep that in mind. They're a very, very big producer in that. Mexico is also somewhat large at about $20 billion worth. One thing that the studies have found is that a 25% tariff on Canada and Mexico could raise production costs for US automakers, adding $3,000 to the price of some roughly 16 million cars sold in the United States each year. Grocery costs could also rise too, as Mexico is the US's biggest source of fresh produce, supplying more than 60% of the United States vegetable imports, nearly half of all fruits and nuts imports. Just keep that in mind. The US, however, despite this, just keep in mind that our whole economy is not made up of trade, unlike other countries, because we have a much larger GDP, right? Our GDP is so huge. Even like a $1 trillion is actually not as big of a percentage of our GDP compared to like Germany or the UK or Japan. So just keep that in mind. Now, what about our other countries? Obviously, they are more dependent on this, and they depend more on the US than the US does on some of them. So, for example, if you look at Canada, right, 78% of their exports go to the US and then 22% go to the rest of the world. So Canada is very dependent on the US for this trade, whereas for the US, only 14% of their imports come from Canada. You guys can see how Canada does depend more on the US. And then if you look at Mexico, for example, about 80% of all of their exports, out of all their exports, 80% go to the US alone. So the US is their biggest trade partner, and they depend a lot on them. They depend a lot on us, if anything. But then for the US, only 15% of their imports actually come from Mexico. So it's a much smaller percentage. So these countries depend a lot on the US. The US is not as dependent on them. But still, when you combine them together, right, that actually is a bigger percentage. Almost a third of our trade does come from them. So it is a bigger sector once you combine Mexico and Canada. However, when it comes to China, China also depends a lot on trade, but their trade is different. So when it comes to their exports, 85% of them go to the rest of the world. Only 15% of their exports come to the US. So they don't depend as much on the US as many may think. The US also only gets about 14% of their imports from China. Once again, China is only 14%, Mexico is 15%, and Canada is 14%. But when you combine them, when you combine those three numbers, it gets very close to almost 50%. So maybe individually it's like, 15%, but if you combine everything, it's almost 50%. And that's why it's very, very important. This is why this is very, very huge. Now, what's going to happen, at least moving forward? A lot of goods are going to be impacted by this, from crude petroleum prices, petroleum gas, natural gas, cars, and the list goes on. We do depend on these different countries for a lot of different things. So keep that in mind. This is going to cause a big shift in supply and demand, the amount of products that we actually get imported. It's also going to be impacting prices. Here are a list of products that could be affected. So, for example, these are the countries that affect us. So we have like Canada first. If we increase the tariffs on Canada to 25%, it's going to have a big effect on petroleum, wood, charcoal, aluminum, iron, steel appliances, cereal, many dairy products, rubbers, alcohols, and the list goes on. Lots of products like umbrellas, wool, and it's many, many different products out there. Don't forget petroleum, natural gas, and the list goes on. So we depend a lot on Canada for that stuff. This could be affecting our petroleum prices as well, because at the end of the day, the consumer is also going to have to pay the price as well. Then on top of this, you have Mexico, right? What's going to happen if you increase tariffs on Mexico? This could be affecting cereals, paper products, processed foods and nuts, tropical fruits, tomatoes, onions, lettuce, cabbage, fruit juices, dairy products, eggs, honey. The list goes on, guys. Lots of meats, seafoods, avocados, Don't forget maple syrup. That's going to be a big one. A lot of, I'm sorry, maple syrup is for Canada. Sorry about that, guys. That's going to be a big one as well. But for Mexico in particular, a lot of our fruits come from them. Lots of fruits and vegetables, lots of oils, and the list goes on. From China, we get lots of products from them. From when it comes to manufacturing, fish, and when it comes to food specifically, we get sugar, coffee, tea, spices, cereals, soaps, and the list goes on. A lot of different products from them. So these could be impacted by the tariffs as well. So keep that in mind. This is all very, very important news. Donald Trump's tariffs will cause a big shift. So we'll see what that leads to, at least for all kinds of different products for clothes, and the list goes on. Looking at more news, Donald Trump is saying that he wants to impose the 25% tariffs as soon as tomorrow. There are some more economists that are saying that this could cause inflation to go up to some extent. So that is actually a fact. So please keep that in mind. So that's just a short-term effect. I also want to add that as far as Tesla is going, as far as Tesla's news goes, so that's not a good news for Tesla itself. Their sales also went down in Europe. I went over this in my previous video. If you guys want to watch that, you can see more details. But the February sales went down for Tesla to some extent, and then their sales, that's a little bit more negative news for them. There was good news that came out on the other hand, which was that Morgan Stanley has good ratings coming out for Tesla, expecting a $430 price target. It wasn't enough to save the share price, though. It's still falling, unfortunately. So, what about these tariffs? So, here's the thing to remember. The 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada could be imposed as soon as tomorrow. It's going to be affecting a lot of products. The 20% tariffs on China is causing more volatility. We're still waiting for the EU, the reciprocal tariffs, India, and all these other countries as well. So we're still waiting. The cons are this is going to be bad for our GDP for the short term. It may de incentivize trade. It's also going to cause some deadweight losses, unfortunately. There's going to be higher inflation for the short term. For the short term, what this means is prices, the rate at which they go up may go up faster for the short term, but then as for the longer term, they will eventually neutralize. And that does not mean prices will go down. We're just talking about the rate at which prices are changing. That's all that inflation is. People oftentimes think that inflation and prices are the same thing. They're not. Inflation just measures the rate of change of prices. So, for example, I always go over this example with you guys. For the next decade and many decades, inflation is going to continue to go up. Prices will continue to go up. Why do I say that? Well, look at the prices from the 80s, the 70s, the 1960s. Things were way cheaper back then. Inflation is consistent. It's going to continue to cause prices to go up forever, right? They're not going to be coming back down. What's going to happen is for the short term, for like 6 months out, according to studies, the tariffs are going to cause the tariffs are going to cause inflation to go up just temporarily at a faster rate temporarily. Then over many, many more months, it's eventually going to normalize back down closer to like the 2% target. But that may take, a while to get back down there. But once again, prices will continue to go up. Other countries may want to increase tariffs in the US. So an example is like, I think we had Mexico and Canada threatening to increase tariffs on the US again. China, I think Canada is going to likely do it, but that's going to be very dependent on what happens with the tariffs when they're imposed and such. It's going to be hurting businesses to some extent. Donald Trump is arguing that this is for fairness because of injustice that's going on with these different countries, trade deficits. He claims that this is going to increase government revenue, which is true. We are going to see government revenue go up, but can that offset the negative effects? We'll have to see about that. We're still waiting to see. I want to give you guys a very important reminder about all this data because this is very important. Now, moving forward, tomorrow is going to be Tuesday, March 4th, 2025. At 8:55 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have the Red Book report. At 10 a.m., we have economic optimism that could cause some volatility. I don't think economic optimism is going to be that strong, so be careful. And besides that, we just have a bunch of Fed speakers. But then, even though there's not a ton of data coming out for Tuesday, the main thing is going to be Donald Trump, his speech, his tariffs. That could cause a lot of volatility, so get ready to spike that, okay? That's going to be very huge. To add on to this, we have Target, Best Buy, and a few more announcing earnings. And then on Wednesday, we have Foot Locker and many others. So just keep that in mind. That's going to be a big factor. The Fear and Greed Index is currently at extreme fear. That's making up the majority of sentiment. Momentum is at extreme fear. And then the put to call option ratio is going up. This is not the best of signs because we're still seeing more puts being bought. And then right now, the VIX is at extreme fear mode. So right now, there's a lot of fear for the markets. There is still a lot of panic, and we'll have to see how things end up going. With that being said, that is it for the parts of this video where I talk about, all these tariffs and news like that. Let's now focus on what's going on with the charts. So Looking at Tesla, there's a crystal clear downtrend that's being respected as we're making lower highs and lower lows. We have this resistance to watch for around this 299 area. And so far, we've got this big rejection. So heading into tomorrow, we want to see Tesla try to rebound a bit because we already gapped down. And then if we see a small rebound, we'll have to see if we can reclaim at least 302. If not, this just could be a small rebound in the morning before we end up continuing to dip lower. I'm watching these lows here. Can we hold the 270s? If not, we're going to likely start filling our gap closer to 250. So please be very careful with Tesla. As of right now, the trend is just lower highs and lower lows. No sign of a major bounce. We tried to bounce only to get a rejection. So we are still looking a bit more bearish looking at the 4-hour time frame. Looking at the daily on Tesla, it's the same thing essentially. Sorry, the daily right over here. We're still looking a little bit weak on the daily. We're also down in the after hours, so it's showing weakness compared to the market. We also rejected off our 200 EMA, so it's weakness. And we have this gap to fill down here, so there's still a risk of more downside for Tesla. So please keep that in mind. For the rest of these, looking at SPY, we got this big rejection. Now, notice that we have these supports to watch for on SPY. I'm going to pull up the 4-hour just to show you this. If SPY does not hold 581 where this trend line is, we're looking for 580, then 575 as our potential target, all the way down to these lows. If we manage to hold 585, we could attempt for 588s to 590. I'll be watching that very closely. But please note that 6 out of the last 7 days were basically just a pump in the morning, then a dump at the end of the day. Pump and dump, pump and dump, pump and dump 6 out of 7 days in a row. There was only one big bounce day on Friday since the market was due for that, but overall the trend remains more bearish. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see attempts to rebound, especially because futures are green right now. In the morning, for that 588s to 590 targets, we got to reclaim at least 590. If we push to that and we reject again, we're looking for a big move back down towards 580. If that doesn't hold, we're looking for 575 as a potential target to where this trend line happens to be down here. And that could cause more downside. This is what the market's been doing. We pump in the mornings, then we dump as the day goes on. If Donald Trump signs more tariffs, that does lead to more downside. Watch your levels just to be safe. We need SPY to close above or hold 590 to try to bounce. Otherwise, it's just a pump and dump like move. That's all we've been doing for the last couple of days. The QQQ has the same thing. Out of the last couple of days, 6 out of the last 7 days were just pumps and dumps over and over again, continuing to show weakness, at least for the markets, not looking too good. So with that being said, we tried to bounce on the QQQ only to get a rejection, especially with Nvda selling off. It's not really helping this. We could attempt to get back up to about like the low 500s, but we need to try to break past 510 or so to try to bounce. If not, we're going to be at risk of continuing to fall. I think that we could attempt to push right here towards this resistance at 506 or so. If we can't hold that, we may continue to fall. If we can't hold above 500, I think we're going to be at risk of retesting the lows at 493, if not the low 490. So please keep that in mind, guys. There's still weakness on this chart. For the Russell 2000, we're down 2.73%. We're actually making a big rejection move. This was our main resistance, now becoming support. So we have to hold this to try to get some kind of bounce. Otherwise, we're not looking too good. We may attempt to get some kind of rebound move towards like 210 to 212. But if we can't hold above that, we may end up turning back down for 205. So keep that in mind. We're still showing a lot of weakness right now. For others out there, we have ES. Okay, ES is not looking that great. We're also seeing ES in a very, very similar trend right now. Looking at the charts, we're making lower highs and lower lows. We're trying to hold this lower support right here, but we're not doing the best of jobs. And we have this head and shoulders like pattern that's still showing some weakness. So watch this trend line to see if we hold. That's going to be around that 5,800 area. If that fails us, we turn a lot more bearish. We need to get back above 5,900 to 5,930 to try to bounce. I do think we try to push a little bit, and then there might be a rejection move. And we should be testing this trend line possibly if we get a big rejection again. If we reject off 5,900 or so, we're looking for a move back down to 5,800. If that fails us, we're looking for a bigger move down. For NQ, we're technically on a downtrend, making lower highs and lower lows. You want to see it get back above 21,000 to bounce. If not, we could be revisiting this trend line. See the blue trend line here? This is resistance becoming support. If we don't hold that, we could be looking for a move back down to the low 20,000 area. So we could be looking for a temporary bounce here before it rejects, and we could start dipping towards the low 20,000s. Keep that in mind, as there's going to be a risk of more downside. For Bitcoin, We're technically making lower highs here. We have like a double top leg pattern, and we got this big rejection. You want to see this hold above 88,000. Otherwise, this may continue to fall back down towards these lows in the 83,000 area. So please be very careful if we get some kind of rebound and a rejection like this, kind of forming like a head and shoulders. For Nvda, we're making lower highs and lower lows. We're looking for the support around here, very close to this 113 area. If that fails us, I could be looking for a dump. I want to see this reclaim 115 to bounce. Otherwise, this may continue to fall, so be careful. We're at a big support right here at 114. We'll see if we get a rebound move first and a rejection. We need to reclaim 117.6 to really bounce. Otherwise, if we come short, we're looking for another move to the low 110s or below, so be careful with Nvda just to be safe. Aapl is barely holding support. Notice the 4-hour yellow trend line. We bounced off this many times. We got to hold this. We need to see Aapl get back above 242. If not, if we hit this and reject again, we're looking for this retest. If this does not hold and we get a bad piece of news with the tariffs, this could be resembling kind of like an inverse cup and handle and then start dipping lower. So be careful. If we end up losing the yellow trend line, we're looking for the low 230s if that fails us. For now, it's holding, so I do think it's going to push for 242, and we'll see if we reject. So please be very careful. For now, look for a little rebound, but then we'll see how it goes. For the rest of these guys, I'm going to be kind of quick with the rest. So just keep in mind that Netflix is on a downtrend. We're in the middle right now. If we lose 954, we're looking bearish. If we break past 990, we're bullish. I wouldn't be surprised if we push for about 984 before it starts dipping for the 960s. So be careful. For MSTR, we're also making lower highs. Not looking too good. We need to see this reclaim 263. Otherwise, we could be dipping for essentially 230. So keep that in mind. For Celsius, we're making lower highs here, so we could be dipping back down for about the 24s. I want to see it reclaim 26.5. Otherwise, we're going to be dipping for 24.5 or below. For Supermicro, we're making lower highs here. We're going to be looking to see what happens at around 40. If we can't hold that, we could be dipping closer to about the 32 area. For Palantir, we're on a bit of a downtrend right here. We want to see if we could reclaim around the 85 area. Otherwise, this is going to continue to fall back down towards 80. I'm seeing some weakness here, so unfortunately, it is still favoring 80 or below. For Rivian, we look a bit more bearish. We're making lower highs as well. This could be dipping towards 11 flat. SoFi is making lower highs. We're at support right here. We got to hold this support around 13.5. If that holds, we could try to bounce for about 14. If not, this is like a double top, and if 13.5 breaks, do expect this to start dumping all the way down to the low 13s. For AMD, we're on a bit of a downtrend. We want to see this reclaim 102.5. Otherwise, this could be tipping for about 96 or below. So I'm still seeing weakness on AMD no matter what. At least for now, there's no sign of a bounce. ARM is looking weak, lower highs as well. You want to see it reclaim 27.8 to bounce. Might try to push for 125 before it tries to reject. So just be careful. Coin is looking weak. We tried to balance with the crypto reserve news that Donald Trump talked about, but it wasn't enough to get the share price to hold. We got a big rejection to fill the gap. So we could be dipping back down to the low 200s, if not 195. Amazon's on a downtrend. You want to see it reclaim 212. Otherwise, we could be dipping closer to about the low 200s. For Meta, we're technically on a downtrend. You want to see us reclaim 668s to bounce. Otherwise, we were favoring a move back down towards 650. I think it bounces tomorrow morning for the 660s before it starts dipping lower, but it still looks like it's on a downtrend. There's no sign of a true bounce yet, and 650 or below is very possible. MSTR is on a bit of a downtrend. We want to see if this could reclaim 395. We might push a bit. If we reject, we could continue to fall back down for 386 or below, so just keep that in mind. For Google, we're on a big downtrend right now, especially as we're rejecting off our 20 EMA. We could try to push for essentially 172. If that rejects, we may continue to fall for 167 and then 165. We still look pretty weak. GameStop has a double top. We could be dipping back down towards 24. AMC is on a bit of a downtrend. We could be dipping all the way down towards 3 flat. For DJT, we could be rejecting and dip all the way down towards 22.5. So just keep that in mind. The VIX is a little bit more bullish. It's on a nice uptrend. However, I just want to say that there's a possibility that we might dip a little bit first. Maybe the market rebounds a bit, but then this is continuing to uptrend. We haven't even lost our 50 EMA yet. The VIX is still bullish, which is a bearish sign for the markets. The 10-year is dipping, and so is the dollar. It's not really affecting things. We're kind of dipping with the markets as well. But the dollar is trying to hold at 106.5. We'll see if that holds or not. Anyways, Unfortunately, Tesla is bearish. We're making lower highs and lower lows. There's no true sign of a bounce yet, and there's going to be a risk of further downside if we continue this trend. So, unfortunately, that's what I'm seeing for the time being. I want to thank you all so much for listening. So, please have a good rest of your day. We love to rebound a bit in the mornings, so we might see a small rebound attempt followed by even more downside. So, get ready. Donald Trump should be signing more executive orders, most likely for Canada and Mexico tomorrow. So, be prepared, guys. Do what you have to do, and I'll see you guys with another upload tomorrow morning. Have a good night. I'll see you guys very soon, and peace out.